I want to take you back to the year 2011 when I decide that I want to tell the story about my mom, but I've never told anyone that she has schizoaffective disorder. I want people to know that with treatment, there's hope. But the thing is, I'm a scientist. I run clinical trials. I don't write stories. I don't perform on stage. What is it that I can do to bring the story to life? How will I go about figuring out what it means to be a writer and storyteller? Well, I know how to find experts, so I find a fear expert. And she tells me, take a 40-day fear cleanse. That's how long it'll take you to develop a new habit. Take a 40-day fear cleanse. She says, write everything that you're scared of. Write it down. And so I think I love to make lists. I can do this. So I start to make a list. I make a list one by one. I say, write a book. The next one, perform the story. And then she says, do one thing every day. And I think, oh, okay. Writer's Digest says, you can write a book in 30 days. I start writing my book. And I start chronologically, but I start with a story of when I'm 6 years old, and I stop there, because it's one of the most traumatic things that's happened to me. So what will I do next? If I don't tell my story, I think that there are people who will never find out what it means to live with mentally ill parents. So I want to persevere, and I have to overcome my biology. Can you imagine if every time you were scared, you had to puff up just like this fish? Well, that's what I felt like, and I wanted to figure out how to overcome that cortisol rush that induces anxiety. And I thought, well, maybe there's a different way. Like, from a scientist perspective, I could titrate. I could do what comes easily, right? Think like a scientist. And that meant I could, again, do research and find out, well, now, where do the bloggers meet? Because they write, and they write a little bit every day. And so I showed up at the Blog Her conference in San Francisco, just 200 professional women bloggers, and I sat with them, and they said, well, what blog do you have? And I said, I don't have a blog, but I was curious, and I got to spend the day with them and find out that, yes, they had also transitioned from working in a company, from being an expert to starting a blog. And I thought, I could probably do this. Maybe I could do this. But it would be too scary to start blogging about living with a mentally ill parent. So I thought, I'll blog about things that do two things at once, like a swing set that generates electricity. It's like the metaphor for my life as a scientist becoming a storyteller. And then I decided I would join a writing group. You know those writing groups? Well, I joined one, and I put myself in front of them. I took a few pages that I'd written, and I actually decided to read them in front of them. I made a binder. I put all the pages in there, and I showed it for class. And she said, okay, now you're going to read. And so I read that terrifying scene about me when I was 6 years old with my mom. And I thought that they would just rip into me, But actually, I found out that this memoir writer had a much more gentle way. She said, write a Valentine, everybody. And so people started scribbling. And what they were scribbling were encouraging notes. And that gave me the strength to actually continue and to revise what I had written and to make something more of it, rather than just crawl home, head down in shame. So with that, I decided I would go on and continue to figure out what it meant for me to become a writer. And that meant practicing compassion, because it's really the antidote to perfectionism. As a scientist, I was encouraged or even expected to be a perfectionist, but you can't do that as a writer. You don't write anything. And I ended up inviting more humor and joy into my life as a result, because, well, if you can't trip and laugh at yourself, what are you going to do? Especially when you get up on stage, as I did in 2014, and told this story about my mom with her in the front row. And afterwards, we had this reception, and she said, I'm so glad you told this story. Now I understand you better. Also in the audience were my childhood friend and her mother, and they asked me if I had any pictures from my childhood. I said, no, my mother destroyed them all. It was a symptom of her illness. They said, well, we've got one for you. And there it is. So you never know what might happen. So now you know what to do. Do something every day that scares you, and I'd love to hear about it. Send me a note. Thanks.